Kia ora koutou. I'm Mervin Singham, the Chief Executive for the Ministry for Ethnic Communities. I'm joined today by Rebecca Kitteridge. Rebecca is the Director General of the New Zealand Security Intelligence Service. I know many of you have got questions about exactly what does the NZSIS do. I'll be posing some of those questions to Rebecca today. But before we do that, Rebecca, can you tell us something about yourself?
Yeah, okay. So my background is that, you may know that I trained as a lawyer, and
I do.
And that I came into the public service and have always really loved the work that I do for the public. And I worked for a long time in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, in the Cabinet Office as the legal advisor, and then the Deputy Secretary and then Secretary of the Cabinet, giving constitutional advice to the Prime Minister, the Governor-General, and running the Cabinet Office. So that was a big part of my life for a long time before this job, and it gave me that love of and understanding of the Constitution, of the importance of the law, of an appreciation of human rights, and all of that is really speaks to my values. In my own life, I'm a wife and a mother, and as well. And if you see me in the weekend, I'm very likely to be either on a big striding walk or I'll be on my bike. And a secret here is that I really love to sing. So I'm part of a choir, and I love music.
We learn something every day, right? Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Now moving to NZSIS. For a lot of people, NZSIS is shrouded in mystery. They sort of think everything you do is in secret, and there's a lot of myths in this area. What's myth and what's reality?
There are so many myths about the service, and it's always been that way. And partly that's been because we have been, I think, in the past a bit too secretive. So that's changed a lot in recent years. And I'll talk about that in a minute, the importance of being as transparent as we can. But when I think about what the myths are, I think, there's a sense that people have always had that we are reading everybody's emails, that we're monitoring the entire internet. People are influenced by watching Bond films. They watch programs like Homeland. And when I see those things, I'm absolutely horrified to think that people think that we're charging about the countryside in Aston Martins, detaining people unlawfully, whatever that might be. And actually in our country, it's not like that at all.
So a lot of people listening to you, Rebecca, right now, they come from different countries where the national security system is very different from New Zealand. Yeah. What's different, do you think, that they need to understand?
So around the world, organisations like mine are run very, very differently. And there are places I know where there are all kinds of breaches of human rights that happen through organisations that are security organisations. We are not like that. We operate only in accordance with the law. Everything that we do has to be necessary and proportionate. It has to be lawful. It has to be in accordance with human rights. We are very conscious of privacy and the rights of people to express political opinions, and all of that is enshrined in our legislation. So I think it is really important that people understand that we think about that all the time when we're conducting the work, and also that it's not just me saying it. There is an Inspector General of Intelligence and Security who is our oversight body, and that is an office of, I think it's 7 or 8 people who have their job is to look across us and the GCSB all the time to conduct inquiries and reviews and to ensure that we are actually operating according to the law. So if anybody at any time feels like they have been they're bothered about an interaction they've had with us, or they feel like they've been adversely affected in any way, they can complain to the Inspector General, who will look into it. And that Inspector General is completely independent from us.
So if somebody listening says, we think NZSIS hasn't done their job properly, they can complain, the way you just described before?
If there's anything there, for example, anybody who had an interaction with one of my officers who felt unhappy about it could complain to the Inspector General, who would look into it. And so I would actually encourage anybody who is in that situation to do that.
Thanks, Rebecca. Now, one of the things that a number of people in our communities have asked is they say, if you're not looking for something, you won't find it. So they're worried that NZSIS hasn't and continues not to pay attention to right-wing extremists, people who are anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, and so on. What can you tell us about that? Because people are concerned that that threat continues to exist because you're not paying enough attention.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. The language that we use now is identity-motivated violent extremism. So white identity extremism, I think, is what you're talking about. And, it really is still, I regret to say, present in New Zealand. The worst expression of it, the most horrendous expression of it, was in the attacks on the mosques on
Yes.
the 15th of March. And I just want to take this opportunity, Mervin, to express my sorrow about the shuhada and the survivors of that attack, those attacks, because it was the darkest day in New Zealand's history and something that I think about and the people in the service think about every day.
Okay, so following the mosque attacks, the tragedy in Christchurch, there was a Royal Commission of Inquiry into the mosque attacks, and a report was produced with extensive recommendations. There's a little bit of confusion about what the report actually says in relation to NZSIS and the wider security system. Can you tell us your take on that?
Yeah, sure. The most important finding in the Royal Commission report is that there was no failure on the part of the agencies involved in the counter-terrorism effort that meant that that meant that the attack was able to happen. It was not possible to prevent it, to detect it, or to prevent it. I wish it had been possible, but the Royal Commission found that it wasn't in that case. The Royal Commission also did not find that NZSIS was looking in the wrong place. They acknowledged that there were real investigations that were underway that were taking up the whole of the NZSIS effort at the time, and acknowledged that those investigations were warranted, justified, and important. What they did say was that there was an inappropriate concentration of resources. So that raises the question, well, what do they mean by that? And the Royal Commission itself says it takes a bit of explaining. But what they said was that the fact that we were fully taken up, the very scarce resources were so fully taken up without being able to look more broadly, that should have been the subject, that resourcing problem should have been considered by the system as a whole and a decision made about whether it was acceptable or not, and that didn't happen. And I think we all accept that it should have happened. In fact, the Royal Commission says that it wouldn't have made any difference in this case, but it's a really important lesson for the future.
So, Rebecca, can I ask you a personal question? On the day of the mosque attacks, when you heard about it, what went through your mind?
I was profoundly shocked. The scale of the attack was so terrible. And as I say, all of us in the service are motivated every day to. The reason we come to work is to keep the country safe. I will never get over it, honestly.
Yeah, it was horrific, yeah.
I will never get over it.
So, Rebecca, if somebody walked into NZSIS, walked the floors, what would they see? Like, what's your culture in NZSIS? Could you describe that for us?
So it's an amazing group of people that work there. They are. I think what is really special about the service is that the people who come to work there, they are really motivated by wanting to serve the country. So we don't have people dragging their feet into work. They really believe in our mission. And I know that there are companies that have mission statements, but for us, it's not a mission statement, it's the mission. And they tend to be young, they are creative, they are vibrant, and they are diverse, increasingly diverse. And that's been a very deliberate decision on our part, and something that I took very much from the Royal Commission report, but that we were already working on, was the importance of having a really diverse staff that's bringing different perspectives into the work, and that is able to reflect and serve the communities in New Zealand.
So can I just clarify that, Rebecca? Are you saying that some of the people listening, if they were interested in NZSIS, they can apply? Or can I ask you a pointed question? Do you have a preference for people from particular countries?
We want the best people wherever they come from, and we want people who are going to bring perspectives and understanding and knowledge of their communities so that it will help inform us to be culturally sensitive, actually, to understand how we can work collectively with all of the communities in New Zealand to keep the country safe. And, that means we have to actually enrich our discussions and by understanding those communities.
So speaking about cultural sensitivity, Rebecca, what do you do for your staff to help them upskill in that area?
There's a range of things that we do. At the most basic level, all staff are required and do undertake unconscious bias training. Our managers and anybody involved in recruitment or promotion do additional unconscious bias training. And then, of course, there's extra kind of training that we do to make sure that people have got a good understanding of different communities that we might engage with. And we work with those communities to make sure that that's appropriate and that our staff have got a good cultural understanding.
And how do you know it's working?
Because we continue to engage with those communities, and we're always open to feedback, always open to learning, and increasingly we are getting alongside different communities so that they don't feel like we are spying on them. That's absolutely not what we want, and it's what we are, and we don't actually spy on communities. That would be unlawful. What we really want to do is to have relationships of trust with all of New Zealand's communities, so that everybody understands they have a role to play. Everybody understands that we are trying to keep all communities safe, and that they'll talk to us if they're worried about anything.
So Rebecca, I've heard you say this before, that communities can play a role in preventing violent extremism from actually occurring. Yeah. How can we play that role? What do we do?
Well, it's a great question, and I really do believe that everybody has a role to play. This is something that we can all contribute to New Zealand's national security. So it is a matter of being alert, not alarmed, but alert, and to be able to identify what are the signs that means that a person that you might know might be of concern. So in the service, we have published recently something called Know the Signs, which is set of observable behaviours that if people see them, they might indicate that there is a national security problem. And if they see those kinds of indicators, what we would really encourage them to do is to contact either police or the service, and that's a great contribution that you can make to keeping the country safe. What we would do with that, if we get some information of that kind, is we would very discreetly investigate whether we think that person is of real concern or not. Sometimes they're not, and that's very useful to know that as well. But sometimes that information can be the crucial thing that we need to understand that there is a real problem. So 15% of the security intelligence investigations that we conduct started with a tip from the public. So,
wow.
That can be the difference between something really terrible happening and the country being safe.
So that sounds really good, Rebecca. That, in other words, people in the community have a role to play in sharing information to prevent things going wrong, going off the rails. But some people would say that sounds like you're asking New Zealanders to dob each other in to NZSIS. What's the story behind that?
And I do think as a country we do not like dobbing in. We are not asking people to dob other people in. What we are saying is that there are real national security threats in our country, and it's sad to say, but it's true. It's in all of our interests that where those exist, they're identified as soon as possible, so that either there can be some course correction with that person, maybe we can involve other agencies, we can let them know in a very discreet way that there seems to be a problem. We could, if it's more serious, we can get police involved. They can investigate and disrupt whatever might be happening, so that it is so important that people will play their role in order that national security problems and concerns can be disrupted as soon as possible, and that's a great role that people can play.
So if somebody raises information with NZSIS in the way you just described, do you tell them what's happened after you've investigated the matter, or do you keep that to yourself?
We usually can't tell people what the outcome is.
Right.
What they can be absolutely confident about is that we will, with every single piece of information and lead that we get, we will investigate it properly. And the Royal Commission into the mosque attacks did say that we always properly investigated leads that we received. The reason we can't go back to people and tell them what happened is that often for national security reasons or for privacy reasons. We can't disclose that information. But what I do want to reassure people is that we take all of that information very seriously.
And can I just check that the person that you're looking into, that they are never informed, or are they informed who's actually given information about them to NZSIS?
We would never tell that information, never disclose that information. We're extremely discreet. And also, we do understand that this is very sensitive. It's something that matters enormously to the individuals, and we are very, very careful about how we conduct those, those investigations or those inquiries.
Rebecca, can you tell us what you think national security threats for New Zealand are today? In
terms of counterterrorism, there is a range of different ideologies, whether it's faith-motivated or identity-motivated, and particularly white identity-motivated. We've seen a rise of politically motivated violent extremism, and I guess the complication of investigating these kinds of threats is that a lot of it is happening online now, and in a way, the ideologies are merging so much and shifting. It's not like you've got one terrorist organisation who is dictating how something is going to happen. What we've got is loose associations of people, a lot of rhetoric that is very hateful, but many of the people who express hateful sentiment online are not serious about conducting an attack. They're simply spreading a horrible ideology. For us, the challenge is trying to find who of those people are really serious about causing harm in a physical sense to other, to New Zealanders. On the foreign interference side, that has also been an area that I've been talking about more over the last few years, because we do see foreign states generally who are not as respectful of human rights and the rule of law as we are in New Zealand, conducting foreign interference in our country. And one of the things that really worries me about that is that I think it has an impact on the communities that come from those countries in New Zealand, that they're here, they want to have their life in New Zealand, and are still feeling sometimes the reach of the country from which they've they come reaching into New Zealand. Now that really offends me. I think people should be safe in New Zealand to be free from that kind of interference and influence activity. And so that's something that we are really aware of, and we want to support those communities. We do see foreign interference not just in those communities, but also reaching into efforts to influence the political level, government officials. It could be at the local government level. It could be, trying to steal information from research institutions. All kinds of areas where our job is to detect and try to disrupt that sort of activity.
Rebecca, can I pick up on something you said before about online expressions of hatred and so on? And you said there's a threshold after which it can actually become dangerous.
Yes.
For some people in the community that go, well, it's all dangerous because that's how you escalate into a situation where violence is expressed. So for you, how do you determine where that threshold is, where somebody's just being hateful, but you're not worried about them, versus where it's crossed the line?
It's a really good question, and what I would say at the outset is that I think the sort of increasing acceptability of expressing hatred and hateful sentiment online is terrible. So I just want to be really clear that I can see that it is a huge problem, particularly for ethnic communities, if it's racist or expressing hatred towards particular faiths. That all of that is an issue that we as a country need to address. That is a lot bigger than NZSIS can solve. It's an issue for the country. Our specific role is to look for where that kind of rhetoric is going to turn into real world attacks. So we have a very specific role to play in relation to that kind of violent extremism. It's when it gets to the violent point. Now, as you say, it is not easy to determine who is, especially when there are people who are expressing, maybe talking about conducting an attack, but they've got no intention of actually doing it. It's our job to work out who the real people are and who aren't, which is why, as I say, other people can really help us by helping us to understand, is that person really serious or not? Are they just a person who likes to talk? They're big noting, they think it's impressing people in some way. And actually we have been very successful in the past in identifying who the really serious people are, and we have disrupted those kinds of attack planning very successfully in the past. So I know it's possible. What I'm saying is we want to harness, we really need the help of the community to do that.
To get it right. Rebecca, can I say thank you so much for spending some time with me today, answering all these very challenging questions. Really appreciate your time.
I just want to say thank you so much for having me. Having this conversation really matters to me and to my organisation. I'm very pleased to have been here. Thank you.
Pleasure to talk to you as always. Thank you.